Welcome to the Watson Institute. I'm David Kennedy, the Interim Director here at the Institute. I'd like to welcome everyone to Brown University and to this conference on regional powers, the new development states and global governance. BRICSA, so Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and their place in the world order.
I think that the most important achievement we had over the past 25 years is that 400 million people have been lifted above the poverty line. And that's why I think that the number of poor will rise. That means that the most important achievement is at risk. This is for me, as a member of one of the BRIC or developing countries, you know. This is the most important point of concern.
If we want to have a recovery of the world economy, it only can work if there is a redistribution of wealth. Because the main question is, how will demand develop in future? How will demand develop? And we all know that there are groups of countries where the readiness to increase the consumption is quite high. And then you have groups of countries where it's very low. And then you have social classes where the readiness to increase consumption is high and where it is rather low. Which means this is also expressing to a certain extent the unjust levels of distribution in the different countries. And I think if one looks at that on a worldwide scale, one could quite easily detect that the redistribution has to go in the direction where there are groups of the population that are really able and willing to increase their consumption.
To point out that actually the China model is essentially a replication of earlier East Asian export-oriented, high-saving, low-consumption, and hoarding of foreign reserve model. But there's key difference, and one difference is the extremity that China pursue export-oriented industrialization and low domestic consumption. Actually, this export competitiveness is based on a long-term wage repression. Of course, it is a very complicated issue why the wage stays so low, and one popular explanation is unlimited supply of service labor from the countryside. But my argument is that this unlimited supply of labor from the countryside is not natural. It is man-made. That actually it has something to do with the agricultural policy of China. That on the one hand, that you can keep exporting because of this wage competitiveness, but at the same time, this wage level constrain the consumption power, domestic consumption power of China, that restrain the expansion of domestic consumption and also prevent the Chinese government's effort of changing model of development from export-oriented to a more domestic consumption. It has been talking for 10 years, but it never happened. So actually that is saying that China is a huge market power, there's a lot of big market there, but in fact that is under-actualized, that if China can do some reform and redistributive reform and put more resources in the countryside and raise the wage level, then the China export competitiveness can be lower, and its accumulation of financial power can be lower, but at the same time the domestic consumption can go up and China can expand its market power and the economy will be more better.
2007, 2008 was a good time for India. Globalization was at its peak. We did well. Services, goods, flows, and we found our place. We were growing at 9%, had 5 years of growth. And the world seemed to be a great place to live in. However, suddenly with this crisis and with the addition of issues related to climate change, food, energy, it all seems to look a bit gloomy. Was it the liberal market economy ideology that has caused this? It's difficult to say. On the Indian economy, we are now relatively open actually, and that's why we are going to be facing the pain irrespective of whether we want to believe it or not. So, where are we now? We are at a 7% growth rate this year. Our banks are fine and healthy, but it's a 2% decline from the previous year. if we were to believe the World Bank estimates, for every 1% decline in developing country growth rates, 20 million people are trapped in poverty. That is a challenge that India faces. We don't face job loss, we face the problem of creating jobs. We face the problems of catering to those who are at the boundaries of growth. The other problem that India faces is, it is infrastructure challenged. It was before this crisis supply constrained. China was demand constrained. India was supply constrained. India needs to invest in infrastructure. Much of the money came through capital flows from overseas. And what is happening today is, in the light of this current crisis, there is the deglobalization of the world taking place. This deglobalization comprises either of slowdown or of withdrawal of investments by US and Western firms from India and other countries, and a sharp decline in US demands for foreign goods and assets. As this deglobalization will gain momentum, we will witness sharp reversals of capital flow because the money will head back home. What do we do? I think regional integration is something that's very important for India. We have consistently overlooked our neighbors, they're not important for us. India should look inward. Our IT has been primarily, information technology has been primarily export driven. There's a vast market, vast territory, and vast requirement at home. This could be the time to do that.
So the property rights cannot be truly defined, or they are not truly defined. Contractual obligations are not really implemented. And the institutional framework for trying so is somehow shaky. Now, why is this? I think it has a lot to do with the way the transition from the former Soviet Union to the so-called new Russia has happened. It has been said that one decisive moment in dealing with this crisis will be that the discrepancies and the disparities in wealth distribution, in income distribution, ought to be tackled. And I think that the explanation of crisis which I have tried to offer, and the description of the Russian system as still not fully monetized in our sense, lends itself for a way of tackling this crisis, which might give an impulse also on a global scale. And I think it is necessary that in the Russian context, the property base of economic activities be broadened. The social and the economic system has to be based upon clearly defined property rights, and these entitlements stemming from property rights, from ownership, as we say in Europe, have to be broadly dispersed. Their broadening might help to take the economy back to a certain level of activity. It might help to re-monetize the system which currently presents itself to a certain extent as demonetized. If alternatives of an international scale in order for them to become successful, to survive, and to become a model perhaps also for development in other contexts, we have to think about the international system as a whole. And we have to think about ways of assisting such specific experiences to take place in order for not unified, homogeneous models, but for a multitude of developments to be possible.